Hitler was a German politician who ruled Nazi Germany from 1934 to 1945. The Nazis were a political party which formed in 1920 but was taken over and ruled by Hitler from 1921 to 1945. Hitler and the Nazis were responsible for the death of 6 million people. His victims were mainly Jews, but other victims were gypsies, homosexuals, Polish people, and disabled people. The victims were held in concentration camps and were sometimes experimented on. Here are 5 evil Nazi human experiments. Number 5. The seawater experiments. To test the potability of seawater, Nazi doctor Hans Eppinger gave gypsy prisoners nothing but seawater. He deprived them of food and fresh water. Because the human kidneys can only produce urine that's slightly less salty than salt water, they urinated more water than they actually drank, in order to remove the excess sodium taken in by the seawater. Due to this, severe dehydration set in. This led to depleted bodily fluids, muscle cramps, and dry mouth. In order for their bodies to compensate for the fluid loss, their heart rate increased, and blood vessels constricted to maintain blood pressure and flow to vital organs. The seawater caused extreme nausea, weakness, and delirium. As they became more dehydrated, their coping mechanisms failed, and due to the excess sodium their brain and organs received less blood. This led to them having organ failure and going into comas, eventually leading to death. It took 12 days for the seawater to cause severe complications and death. Victims licked freshly mopped floors just to get the small amount of fresh water that they could. Number 4. The twins experiment. From 1943 to 1944, Joseph Mengele performed experiments on more than 1,500 twins. He performed the experiments to see the similarities and differences in the genetics of twins, and also to see if the human body could be unnaturally manipulated. The twins were arranged by age and sex, and kept in barracks between the experiments. He performed several horrible experiments, such as injecting different colours of dyes directly into the eyes of the twins to see if it would change the colour of the eye. He also sewed twins together in an attempt to make conjoined twins. Only 200 people survived his evil experiments. Once the experiments were completed, Joseph Mengele would inject chloroform directly into the hearts of the twins to kill them. Number 3. Artificial insemination experiments. The notorious Heinrich Himmler ordered Nazi doctor Karl Klauberg to artificially inseminate female prisoners. He inseminated over 300 women with an unknown substance. He would strap the women down so they were unable to move. He would then begin to taunt them and tell them that he was injecting them with animal sperm so that a monster would grow inside their wombs. Whether it is truly human sperm or animal sperm, it is unknown. After he had seen the results of his experiments, he would inject the women with chemicals to terminate their pregnancies. Number 2. The freezing experiment. These experiments were done in order to discover how long German pilots downed by enemy fire could survive in the frozen waters of the North Sea, and also to see how to treat hypothermia. Dr. Sigmund Rascher submerged victims in vats of icy water for up to 5 hours. Other experiments included placing victims completely naked in temperatures as low as -6. As the hypothermia began to set in, victims' heart rate and blood pressure both decreased. They also had difficulty speaking, confusion, and amnesia. As their temperatures dropped, their skin became blue and puffy, and muscle coordination became poor, and walking was almost impossible. As they became even colder, major organs began to fail. In order to keep them alive so the Nazis could perform more experiments, they had to warm them up. They done this by placing the victims under sun lamps, which were so hot that they would burn the victim's skin. They would also boil water and forcefully irrigate it into the victim's stomach, bladder, and intestines. Could you just imagine the pain that must have caused? Imagine getting boiling water pumped through your stomach or intestines. The boiling water method killed all the people it was applied to. Another method of warming them up was hot baths. They would place the victims in hot or warm baths to warm them up slowly, but some victims died of shock when it was warmed up too quickly. More than 100 people died from the freezing experiments. Number 1. Bone transplant experiment. From September 1942 to December 1943, experiments were conducted to study bone, nerve, and muscle regeneration, and bone transplants from one person to another. Nazi doctors removed bones, muscles, and nerves from victims without the use of pain relief. The cruel experiments led to victims having limbs amputated, and many of the victims were mutilated and exposed to excruciating pain. Every attempt to transplant a limb or joint was a failure. Many of the victims died from the experiments, and the ones that survived had permanent disabilities. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what experiment you thought was the worst in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and also don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with our videos. Goodbye.